mind if we take a few moments and ask you some questions?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experience of becoming deaf, your aneurysm, and just how God blessed you.
Well, first of all, in 1964, I had an accident at Bell, Canada. A frame hit me in the back of the head. I had a construction helmet on, and it came flying out of a manhole in the street, and it hit me in the head, split my helmet in half, and safety helmets don't break, you know that.
Right.
Mine split in half. Fractured my skull. I was off work over a year. I'm totally deaf consequently in my right ear. My inner ear is damaged. That's where your balance is. And if I turn my head standing straight up to the right very quickly like that, and I'm standing up, I'll stagger. And people think I'm actually drunk. And I've had people say, "One too many, Mr. Gretzky," and of course I never ever drink. And I was very fortunate. God helped me get through that. I was off work over a year. I'm totally deaf. I have a permanent ringing in my right ear. It's like a seashell to my ear. Just
wow.
And then in 1991 I had an aneurysm. A blood vessel broke in the right side of my head.
Wow. The same side as your accident.
Yeah. And I laid in a bed for 10 months. I didn't know who I was, didn't know who my family were. They had pictures on the wall of my family. I had to learn who they were. And I didn't even speak English. I went back to the first language I ever learned, which was Ukrainian.
Oh, Ukrainian.
But anyways, I laid in a bed for 10 months. Then I left the hospital, and I had a man stay with me for 2.5 years. I had to relearn life. I didn't know shoes went on your feet.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know how to do a buttons or a zipper. I had no idea. I was a zombie.
Wow.
And when I was in the hospital, they had pictures on the wall of my family. I didn't know who they were. I had no idea. And the end result is today, time for me from the early 70s to the year 2000, roughly, doesn't exist.
Wow.
And I said to the doctor, why is it some things I remember in that time period, all those years, and everything else I don't? He said, I'm going to answer your question. As soon as I clap my hands like that, talk. He said, you ready? I said, yeah. Tell me one thing you can think of, and I'll say 4 things. Tell me one thing you can think of off the top of your head. I don't care what it is, right now. I said, I remember my mom died. I said it that fast. It was 1988. He said, okay, off the top of your head, right now. I said, I remember my dad died in 1971. All I remember is the church service at his funeral.
Wow.
Paris, Ontario, 1971. That's all I remember. He had pancreatic cancer. He said, okay, off the top of your head, right now. I said, remember Wayne's wedding. Remember Wayne standing at the front as Janet was coming up the aisle with that train that was about 2.5 miles long behind her. I guess for a lady that's beautiful. And then when she got there beside him, Tim Feeney, a Canadian singer, friend of Wayne's, he sang from the left side of the balcony in Edmonton. That's where the wedding was. And everybody in the cathedral in Edmonton, I'll always remember, they stood up like this, and they turned around, and they faced the back. They turned their back to the altar. I'll never forget that. Mama would have seen us turning our back to the altar.
Wow.
We'd have got home, don't you ever do that. And after he finished singing, they just turned around and sat down. I'll always remember that. That was 1987. I just remember Wayne's wedding. I just remember the church service. Nothing else. And he says, okay, at the top of your head, right now, what else? Last thing. I said, remember the Canada Cup, 1987, Cops Coliseum against the Russians, second period of sudden death overtime.
Yeah.
Wayne picked the puck up over center ice, over the blue line, went in the left corner, turned to the right, passed it back to Mario Lemieux, one time to Trechek's left shoulder, and they won the game in the second period overtime. And I had my Canada Cup ring on at the time, and I don't have it on right now. And here's the ring to prove it. Just remember that one play of all those games, the one that won it for him. He said, okay, at the top of your head, right now, water, right now, water. I remember I went, I can't think of anything. Then he said this, that's okay, are you a very religious person? And with me, I said, why? 3 to 4 things you mentioned off the top of your head were in a church. And if you're going to remember anything, you'll remember what's most important here. Your mother, your father, your son, the Canada Cup, a way of life, That's what you'll remember.
Mm.
And one thing I forgot to tell you, when I came out of the hospital, after I came home, I'd wake up in the morning and I have no memory I did this. And then I did this for 2.5 years. I have no memory. Used to drive my therapist crazy. I'd open my eyes and I'd start to sing Amazing Grace. I'd sing all 4 verses. When I finished singing, I'd sing all 4 verses again. When I finished singing, I'd sing it all again. I did this all day long, every day. It used to drive my therapist crazy. Apparently he would say, Walter, shut up or go in the other room. We'd be in the theater watching a movie, and all of a sudden I'd start singing Amazing Grace. And I never did that before my aneurysm. I don't know why I did it after.
One thing your doctor said, remember the 4 things that are important to you. Your mother, your father, the Canadian Cup, and your son, and that goal.
Yeah.
But I think the doctor missed the most important thing that was to you, was your faith in God. Because every time you saw yourself, every recall of your memory was in the church.
It was.
And the most offensive memory was when they turned their back on the altar.
Yes.
That's the place.
Never forget that.
That's right. Because it was engrafted in you
that
the altar was a sacred place.
Oh, yeah, see?
And you know...
We've never gone away for that.
That's right. And we believe that the altar is where we lay ourselves down and say, okay, God, this is my life.
Yeah.
Take it and use it. And then you find yourself in the place of your aneurysm and singing, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Your soul was crying out the praises to God, how thankful.
Yeah.
So your doctor missed one key thing.
Yeah.
So it's true your mom and dad were important to you, and it's true the memory of the Canadian Cup.
My faith.
But your faith, it trumped everything.
Yeah. I'd start singing Amazing Grace, and I'd start to cry.
Yeah, because you knew God's grace is what
I didn't
preserved
even know
you.
who I was, and yet I was doing that.
Wow.
I didn't know who my family were, and yet I was doing that. Isn't that something?
Going with our victorious theme for our youth, you raised a young hockey star.
Yeah.
So you got tired of getting cold outside.
Oh, yeah,
and what did you do?
Everybody thinks I made a rink in the backyard with the intention of making him a hockey star. You know what I'm going to do? She said, what's that? I'm going to make a rink in the backyard. He can go out when he wants, as long as he wants. I'll be in a house where it's nice and warm. Cross my heart, it was self-preservation. Yes. I was thinking of myself more than anything, and it worked out the other way. It worked out so good. If it wasn't for that, I would have never made a rink in the backyard.
Yeah, and everybody called him the Great One.
Yeah, and he would go out as soon as he came home from school, and he'd stay there till midnight. And one night, Mrs. Gretzky, she was pretty sick. She went to bed at 8 o'clock, and I had 2 lights at the backyard, and he was out skating, and I watched 11 o'clock news, then watched the sports, and it was about 11:45, and she got up. She stood in front of me. Walter, what are you doing? What are you? Still remember seeing her hands on her hips. What are you doing? Phyllis, I'm watching the news and the sports. Don't get smart with me. What are you doing? I said, are you okay? And I got up and I went, Phyllis, I thought you were sleepwalking.
Oh.
Don't touch me. She said, what are you doing? I said, what are you talking about? What is he still doing outside? It was 20 to 12. I forgot Wayne was still outside skating.
Wow.
All by himself.
Not even cold?
No, totally forgot. Totally forgot. That's how obsessed he was with the sport of hockey.
Paul tells us in Corinthians about running the race, and that we have to run with perseverance. And not to give up. And so there was Gretzky. There he was.
Exactly.
20 to 12, the rest of his peers in bed. And he's improving his accuracy. He wants to nail the target.
Yeah.
He wants to win the prize.
Exactly what he was doing. You have a string hanging there, and he moved the string to the top right of the net, or the top left, or the bottom left, or the bottom right, or someplace in the net. And he just, like I had 2 nets, one at each end. And that's what he would do.
Walter, as we just begin to wrap up, we talked about how you overcame your hearing loss. We talked about the victory of your aneurysm and how God brought you through that. And although everybody in Canada thinks that Daddy built an ice rink and wanted to make this superstar, this great one, He was only preserving his
It
own
was
life.
self-preservation.
But your son still pursued to become victorious and a very great name in hockey.
Yeah, and the things that happened to me, some people would be very bitter because they've lost, like I lost my memory. Time for me, most of the time from the 70s to the year 2000 doesn't exist. I have a permanent ringing in my ear. My inner ear is damaged, and some people will get very bitter about it. But you know what? With me, it's the opposite way. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful every second of every day. I thank God for how lucky I am, what I have, and that I'm still here. Every second of every day. Never been bitter about it, ever. And yet I've seen people who are bitter because they can't move their arm properly or their leg or something like that.
Mm-hmm. God's grace has been good to you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No doubt about that.
So, in the wrap up, we want to help encourage our youth how to be victorious and how they could live life successfully. And there's so much that assaults them and rapes them of just being naturally young people in today's society, right? But Jesus wants to be their number one cornerstone. He wants to be their number one man and just leading them. And he just requires them to have faith in him, to honor him, to surrender their life, not to turn their back on his altar, right? But that daily they would go to him and worship him. And so I'm thinking of the story of Wayne and St. Mark's Anglican Church when they built an addition. And what did Wayne do? What was his involvement in the last process of that?
He laid the last cornerstone on that church.
Yeah.
And whenever Wayne comes home, he never talks about it. He gets up Sunday morning automatically, gets ready for church. No hesitation whatsoever. And a lot of people, as they pass the teenage stage, they stop going.
Yeah.
Even if they went as little kids. With Wayne and her family, that hasn't happened. They all still go.
They all continue to go. Because why? You raised them in the ways of God. You raised them to go to school, to church, Sunday school. But you know what? I just think that that's monumental because he was 18 years old and he laid that final cornerstone in the church. But it was also monumental for his life that he never forgot the true cornerstone.
Yeah, see, there you are.
Because Jesus said he's the cornerstone, right?
Yeah.
And so it's on Jesus that we build our life. And so today, Wayne still goes to church. He still honors and serves God because you and your wife were faithful to raise him in the ways of the Lord. So victorious living would be walking in the ways of God. Attending church.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah. What would your final words be to the New City youth on victorious living for God?
Well, make sure that you always prepare and go to church every Sunday, whenever you can. Even if you're out of town, don't have an excuse that you can't go. Just go, because there's only one God. Without God, you have nothing.
Amen, that's right. And I know you're diligent about bringing young people to church.
Oh, absolutely,
and that's awesome. I'm so grateful.
I take a few of them with me.
I'm grateful. You know what? They need fathers. They need grandparents. Some people think at a certain age they have no impact to make on young people, but you make a greatest impact by bringing them to church. I thank you. I thank you that you gave up time for us today.
Thank you for having me on this.
Yeah, and you know what? We're just blessed. We're blessed to have been with you.
All of us, we're blessed.
Thank
you, everyone.
God bless.
To spend